My coworker showed me a photo of my late uncle at a concert. My coffee cup literally froze halfway to my lips when Melissa asked, "Didn't we go to his funeral last year?" Because right there, on her phone, was my supposedly dead Uncle Thomas, alive, well, and jamming out at a Bruce Springsteen concert. I mean, seriously? My Uncle Thomas. The man I'd personally eulogized 13 months ago. The man I'd watched them lower into the ground. But there he was, clear as day, wearing that same ridiculous gray fedora he'd sported for 2 decades, just 3 days ago. "That's impossible," I whispered, the words barely escaping my throat, my hands starting to shake. "We buried him. I saw it happen." Melissa zoomed in, her voice now laced with concern. "Danny, that's definitely your uncle. My sister took this picture in Philly. She thought she recognized him from your Facebook, but figured it couldn't be him since you posted about his death last year." The office suddenly felt stifling, the fluorescent lights burning holes in my eyes. I snatched her phone. Every detail was Thomas. The weathered face, the crooked nose from his high school football days, that distinctive scar above his left eyebrow. Even the way he stood, one shoulder slightly higher than the other, a result of an old construction injury. This was him. I tried to deny it, rambling about lookalikes or mistaken dates. But even as I said it, I knew. He was wearing a current Springsteen tour shirt, one that didn't even exist when he supposedly died. And in the background? A venue sign, clear as day, showing the date, 3 days ago. Melissa gently took her phone back, her expression sympathetic but troubled. "Danny, I'm so sorry to drop this on you like this. Maybe you should call your family. There might be something you don't know." I nodded mechanically, but my brain was static. The rest of the day was a blur. Every few minutes, I'd just stare, trying to process. At lunch, I drove straight to the cemetery. I stood there, in front of his headstone, reading the inscription I'd helped choose, Thomas Michael Brennan, beloved brother and uncle, 1952 to 2023. The grave was pristine, fresh flowers from Aunt Margaret, as always. But now, all I could think was, what's actually under here? Was that casket empty? Had we all mourned an empty box, that evening? I called my cousin Sarah, Uncle Thomas's daughter, trying to sound casual, like I was just reminiscing. "Hey Sarah," I started, "I know this sounds weird, but I was looking through old photos and thinking about Uncle Thomas. Do you ever feel like something was off about his death? Like maybe things happened too quickly?" The silence on the other end was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight. "Danny, why are you asking about this now? It's been over a year. We all need to move on." "I just keep thinking how sudden it was," I pressed. "One day he was fine, the next, a heart attack, and the funeral arrangements happened so fast. And they wouldn't let us see the body? They said it was because of the heart attack." "Danny, stop." Sarah's voice was sharp, a dagger. "Whatever you're thinking, just drop it. Some things are better left alone. Family is family, and we protect each other. Uncle Thomas is gone, and that's all you need to know." Then, click. The line went dead. Her reaction, so defensive, so abrupt, it just screamed that something was wrong. Why was she so insistent? What did she mean, we protect each other? The next few days were torture. That photo haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face in that crowd, vibrant, alive, enjoying a rock concert while we all thought he was dead. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided. Philadelphia. I had to go. The venue was easy to find. That Saturday, I spent hours showing his picture to everyone, staff, security guards. Most just shrugged. But then, one older security guard looked closer. "Yeah, I remember this guy," he scratched his chin. "He's been to a bunch of shows here over the past year. Always sits in the same general area. Always wears that hat. Real friendly guy. Tips the ushers well. Goes by Tommy, I think." My heart was pounding like a drum solo. "You're sure? You've seen him multiple times?" "Oh yeah, definitely. He's got season tickets for this section. Comes to maybe 8 or 10 shows a year. Always alone, though. Never seen him with family or friends." I thanked him, walking back to my car in a daze. Uncle Thomas wasn't just alive. He'd been living a completely different life for over a year, while we mourned his death. But why? And who else in the family knew the truth? That night, I called Aunt Margaret, Thomas's sister, the one who'd been utterly devastated by his supposed death. She'd been the one to call me, sobbing so hard she could barely speak, 13 months ago, saying Thomas collapsed at home and died. "Aunt Margaret," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Is Uncle Thomas really dead?" The silence was deafening. I could hear her breathing, almost feel her struggling with how to respond. Then, a whisper. Danny, what kind of question is that? Of course, he's dead. I planned his funeral. I've been visiting his grave every week for over a year. Someone photographed him at a concert in Philadelphia 3 days ago, I said, holding firm. I saw the picture. It's definitely him. He's alive, Aunt Margaret. He's been alive this whole time. Another long silence. Then, to my absolute shock, she started to cry. Not tears of grief or confusion, but of relief. Oh God, Danny, she sobbed. I hoped you'd never find out. We all hoped you'd never find out. Asterisk we asterisk? Who's we, Aunt Margaret? What the hell is going on? Through her tears, the whole unbelievable story poured out. Thomas didn't die of a heart attack. He'd come to the family 13 months ago with a nightmare. He was an accountant, working for a construction company that was deep in money laundering for organized crime. He'd found proof, evidence that could send several powerful people to prison for decades. But Thomas wasn't just an accidental discoverer. He'd been secretly documenting everything for months, planning to turn the evidence over to the FBI. The criminals found out about his plans. They gave him an ultimatum: disappear forever, or watch his entire family disappear, starting with his daughter Sarah and her 2 young children. The fake death was his idea, Aunt Margaret choked out. He said it was the only way to keep us all safe. If they thought he was dead, they'd stop looking for him and leave the rest of us alone. But if any of us contacted him or tried to find him, it would put everyone at risk. The ground felt like it was crumbling beneath me. So, the funeral, the casket was empty? We had help from someone Thomas knew in law enforcement, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Someone who understood the situation and helped us stage everything. The death certificate, the funeral arrangements, even the cremation. It was all fabricated. We told ourselves we were protecting Thomas. Protecting us. But what about the evidence against the criminals? I asked. Did he ever turn it over? Her voice got even quieter. That's the thing, Danny. Thomas was supposed to disappear for just a few months while the FBI built their case. But something went wrong. The investigation got compromised somehow. Several key witnesses disappeared or died in suspicious accidents. Thomas realized he couldn't trust anyone in law enforcement. So, he just stayed dead. I sat in my car, outside that concert venue again, the weight of it all crushing me. My uncle was alive, but living in hiding, terrified to contact his own family because of threats from organized crime. And we'd been visiting an empty grave, mourning a ghost, for over a year. Aunt Margaret, I said, a new resolve hardening my voice. I need to see him. I need to talk to Thomas and understand what really happened. Danny, no. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. If those people find out he's alive, they'll kill him for real this time. And they might kill us, too. But my mind was made up. I couldn't unsee that photo. Couldn't go back to visiting an empty grave and mourning someone who was very much alive. I needed answers. And I needed to know why Thomas had chosen to let his family suffer through the pain of his fake death rather than finding another solution. The next morning, I was back in Philly, staking out the venue again. 3 days, nothing. Ridiculous, sitting in my car for hours, watching everyone who walked by. But what else could I do? I went back to the security guard. Do you know any other places Tommy might spend time? He mentioned a small jazz club, about 6 blocks away, that hosted intimate performances on weeknight evenings. That Wednesday night, I was there. Dimly lit, nursing a beer, eyes glued to the entrance. The jazz trio on stage played soft, melancholy tunes, matching my mood perfectly. Then, at exactly 8:30 p.m., he walked in. Uncle Thomas. He looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer, his face more lined with worry. But he moved with the same confident stride. And when he took off his fedora, there was that familiar bald spot that had been growing larger every year since I was a kid. He sat at a small table near the stage, ordered what looked like a whiskey neat, and settled in to listen. For 20 minutes, I just watched. Part of me wanted to run over and hug him, so overjoyed he was alive. But another part was furious for all the unnecessary pain he'd caused. Finally, I stood. Walked over. Tapped his shoulder. He turned, a casual smile fading into absolute terror. Danny, he whispered, his face draining white. What are you doing here? How did you find me? A friend of mine took your picture at a Springsteen concert, I said, sitting down across from him, uninvited. Imagine my surprise when I saw my dead uncle rocking out in the front row. He looked around the club frantically, as if expecting armed men to burst in at any moment. You shouldn't be here, Danny. This is dangerous for both of us. If who finds out? I pushed. Aunt Margaret told me about the money laundering, the threats. But that was over a year ago. Are these people still looking for you? Thomas gave a bitter, humorless laugh. Looking for me? Danny, they never stopped looking for me. The difference is they think I'm dead, which means they've moved on to other priorities. But if they discover I'm alive, if they think there's even a chance I might still have that evidence. What evidence? I demanded. Do you still have proof of the money laundering? He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small USB drive, holding it up so I could see it in the dim club lighting. Everything's on here. Bank records, shell company documents, recorded phone conversations, photos of cash transactions. Enough to put a dozen people in prison for the rest of their lives. Then why haven't you turned it over to someone? I exploded. The FBI? The state police? A prosecutor's office? Because I don't know who I can trust anymore, Thomas said, slipping the drive back into his pocket. The investigation I was supposed to be part of got shut down after 3 witnesses died in suspicious accidents. My FBI contact disappeared. The prosecutor who was supposed to handle the case got transferred to a different state. Someone with serious power and influence buried this whole thing. I leaned forward across the small table. Uncle Thomas, you can't keep living like this forever. You're missing Sarah's life. Her kids are growing up without their grandfather, and we're all still grieving your death. There has to be another way. His eyes filled with tears. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I don't miss watching my grandkids grow up? But I've seen what these people do to families, Danny. I've seen innocent children get hurt because their parents crossed the wrong people. I'd rather stay dead than risk Sarah's kids getting kidnapped or worse. We sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the jazz trio play a haunting version of The Way You Look Tonight. Then, an idea sparked. What if we could find someone outside the local law enforcement system? Someone with no connections to the people who might be compromised? He shook his head. I've thought about that, but I don't know who to trust anymore. For all I know, the corruption goes all the way to the top. What about the media? I pressed. Investigative journalists who specialize in exposing corruption? If you gave them the evidence, they could publish it all at once, making it impossible to cover up. I could see him considering it, weighing the impossible risks against the potential benefits. That might work, he said slowly, but it would have to be someone with a national platform, someone who couldn't be intimidated or bought off by local interests. Over the next hour, we talked. He mentioned a few names, journalists who'd exposed corruption. We settled on Rebecca Winters, a Pulitzer-winning investigative reporter for a major newspaper. I'll reach out to her, I volunteered. I'll explain the general situation and see if she's interested in the story. If she agrees to investigate, you can arrange to meet her somewhere safe and turn over the evidence. Thomas looked skeptical. And what if this backfires? What if the story gets killed or manipulated? What if these people retaliate against the family anyway? Then at least we'll have tried, I told him, looking him straight in the eye. Uncle Thomas, you can't keep living in limbo forever. And we can't keep mourning someone who isn't actually dead. Something has to change. After a long silence, he nodded slowly. Okay, but we do this carefully. With multiple backup plans. And if anything goes wrong, if there's even a hint that someone's been compromised, I disappear completely. And you never see me again. The next week, I poured over an email to Rebecca Winters. I explained the situation in general terms, without revealing specific names or locations, just a whistleblower who'd faked his death to escape retaliation from organized crime and mentioned he had extensive documentary evidence of money laundering and corruption. Her response was faster than I'd expected. She was definitely interested. Suggested a preliminary phone call, and even recommended involving federal agents from outside our local jurisdiction, people who couldn't be connected to any compromised investigations. That phone call with Rebecca lasted over 2 hours. She grilled me on everything, the evidence Thomas claimed to have, the timeline, why he'd chosen to fake his death rather than enter witness protection. By the end of the conversation, she was convinced. This was legitimate. This was big enough to pursue. This sounds like it could be a major story, she told me. If your uncle's evidence is as comprehensive as you've described, it could expose corruption at multiple levels of government and law enforcement. But we'll need to be extremely careful about how we handle it. Rebecca arranged a meeting with Special Agent Catherine Lopez from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit in Washington, D.C. No local connections. The meeting, a hotel in Baltimore, far enough from Philadelphia to minimize the chance of running into anyone connected to the criminal organization. I met Uncle Thomas at the jazz club again to update him. He was nervous, but there was a new determination in his eyes. He looked like a man who was finally going to stop running and face his problems head-on. Are you sure about this FBI agent? He asked for the 3rd time. How do we know she hasn't been compromised, too? We don't know for certain, I admitted. But Rebecca has worked with Agent Lopez on other corruption cases, and her track record suggests she's trustworthy. At some point, we have to take a calculated risk, Uncle Thomas. Thursday morning, Baltimore. A conference room at a downtown hotel. Thomas arrived first, nervous, clutching a leather briefcase that I assumed contained copies of his evidence. Rebecca came 15 minutes later with Agent Lopez, a sharp, serious woman in her 40s who radiated competence and authority. Lopez spent the first hour on Thomas's background, his work at the construction company, and how he discovered the money laundering operation. She took meticulous notes, occasionally asking for clarification. Then Thomas opened the briefcase. And that's when everything shifted. He spread documents across the conference table. Bank records, shell company filings. Agent Lopez leaned forward, her expression intense, studying every detail. "This is extensive," she said after 30 minutes. "If this documentation is authentic, it represents one of the largest money laundering operations we've seen in this region. How long were you gathering this evidence?" "About 8 months," Thomas replied. "I started noticing irregularities in the company's books and began documenting everything I could find. I was planning to turn it all over to the FBI when I learned that the criminal organization had discovered my activities." As he walked her through specific documents, explaining the significance of various transactions and identifying key players in the operation, I could see her excitement grow. This was clearly bigger than she'd ever imagined. "Mr. Brennan," she said, looking him in the eye, "I'm prepared to offer you full federal protection in exchange for your cooperation with our investigation. We can arrange for witness protection for you and your family members, and we can guarantee that this evidence will be presented to a federal grand jury within 6 months." Thomas looked at me, then at Rebecca, then back at Agent Lopez. "What kind of protection are we talking about? And what would happen to my family?" Agent Lopez detailed the witness protection program, how Thomas, and potentially other family members, could be relocated with new identities while the investigation and prosecution proceeded. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a path to safety, a way for Thomas to stop living as a ghost while ensuring his safety and that of his family. "I need to talk to my daughter before I make any decisions," Thomas said. "She has children and they deserve to know their grandfather, but I won't put them at risk." Over the following week, Sarah, Thomas, and I had some incredibly difficult family meetings. Sarah was initially furious with me, thinking I'd put everyone in danger. But when she learned her dad had been alive all this time, hiding just a few hours away instead of being buried in the cemetery she visited weekly, her anger melted into relief, then pure determination. "Dad," she told him during one particularly emotional conversation, "we can't keep living like this. The kids ask about their grandpa all the time, and I have to keep telling them you're dead. Meanwhile, you're sitting in jazz clubs, wishing you could be part of our lives. It's time. We have to take the risk. Get our family back." Agent Lopez and federal prosecutors went to work, building a massive case around Thomas's evidence. The investigation exploded, bringing in multiple agencies and jurisdictions. As the scope of the money laundering operation became clear, within 3 months, federal agents arrested 12 people, charges ranging from money laundering to racketeering to conspiracy. The construction company where Thomas had worked was shut down, its assets frozen. And get this, several corrupt local law enforcement officials, including the police lieutenant who'd helped bury the original investigation, were arrested too. Rebecca's newspaper ran a huge series of articles, detailing how one man's courage in documenting criminal activity had led to one of the largest organized crime prosecutions in the region. They carefully avoided mentioning the fake death, instead portraying him as a whistleblower who'd gone into hiding after receiving death threats. 6 months after that Baltimore meeting, Uncle Thomas was finally home, under federal protection. Witness protection wasn't even needed, because most of the criminal organization's leadership was either in prison or had fled the country to avoid prosecution. Sarah's children were confused, of course, but absolutely overjoyed to discover that their grandpa was alive. At first, they couldn't fully grasp why he'd been gone for so long, or why everyone had told them he was dead, but they were young enough to just adapt to having him back in their lives. And then, the family held a second funeral. This one, to officially resurrect Uncle Thomas. To celebrate his return, his courage. It was a strange but cathartic experience, gathering at the same cemetery where we'd mourned his fake death, but this time, it was a celebration of survival. Looking back, I'm so grateful Melissa showed me that concert photo. Yes, it turned our entire world upside down, but sometimes, the truth, even painful, complicated truth, is always better than living a lie. Even when that lie was born from the best of intentions. 2 years later, Uncle Thomas is fully integrated back into family life. Attending his grandchildren's school events, helping Sarah with home repairs, just like he used to do before everything went wrong. He still glances over his shoulder sometimes, still checks his car for tracking devices. But he's learning to live with normal levels of caution, not constant fear. And the jazz club? It still sees him on Wednesday nights. But now, sometimes, Sarah joins him. A subtle, beautiful sign that our family, finally, is truly, completely, back together.